So I'm gonna divert from regeneration and say that the breakthrough that's going to really extend healthy longevity is getting rid of menopause. So hear me out. Um, Ovaries are very odd in terms of the human body. They age at about 2.5 times the rate of the rest of the tissue. So when a woman is in her late 20s, her ovaries are already showing overt signs of aging, while the rest of her body is essentially functioning at peak performance. So they're sort of like the canary in the coal mine for aging. And if you think about it, this is an incredible model for accelerated aging. Everyone wants a magic pill. Um, and while there might be some coming down the line, I think that the best advice is to think about when you're eating. So I think there's really great evidence that the time at which you eat and the time that you eat during the day, essentially the hours during which you eat, really make a huge difference in terms of how your body responds. So when we stop eating, the body goes into a process called autophagy, which is really important for cleaning out the gunk in cells. And this only happens many hours after you've stopped eating. And so essentially compressing down the time when you're actually consuming food makes an incredible difference in terms of your metabolic function. And so that's a very simple thing that people can do. It doesn't require any sort of pills. It doesn't require any sort of intervention. It's simply a behavioral thing. And I'm not suggesting to even change what you're eating, just to change when you're eating it.
So I'd like to make a couple of points before talking about specific recommendations. One is the realization that 93% of your lifespan and your health span, the healthy years that you can expect to live, are determined by your lifestyle. Only about 7% from genetic factors that you've inherited from your parents. I think this has really incredibly important implications in terms of the fact that your health is in your hands. It's not and there's no fatalistic approaches to health. It is in your hand. The second aspect is that we live through an epidemic of chronic diseases right now in the elderly. You're familiar with all of these diseases: heart disease, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, cancer, neurodegeneration, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, macular degeneration, and the list goes on and on. All of these diseases' main risk factor is aging. Now, if we target the aging pathways, we target all of these diseases together, and you can actually suppress or compress the number of years that you can expect to be sick in your life. So that being said, so what should you do? I realize that we are at a conference of investors, and I would like for all of you to look at your health the same way you look at as your portfolio. And I think I would be probably not incorrect by saying that most people actually invest a lot of time and resources in managing their financial resources and very little in terms of their health. So I've been thinking about what are the lessons that we can learn from the financial world in terms of managing your health. And many of the rules are actually the same. The first is you should be surrounding yourself by the very best talent in terms of advising you. And I hate to say this, but I think traditional medicine is not really about prevention. So I would look for alternatives. And the Buck Institute, where Jennifer and I are working, is actually hopes to be in the future one of these sources of information. So get information from the best, start early, and go for the long term. There's no quick gains, so be aware of fads, be aware of people who promise you too much. So health is a process that you build throughout your life and eventually reap the return at the end. I think this would be my advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, it's true. The age at which women goes through menopause, essentially menopause makes a woman's body age faster. It really does accelerate aging. It increases a woman's risk of heart disease, stroke, cognitive decline, all sorts of things by a dramatic amount. And so what that means is that half the population is going to be living more than half their lives in this state of declined, altered health. right? And so, from a practical perspective, all women obviously should care about this issue. But, from an economic perspective too, everyone on the planet should be thinking about this. Essentially, we've got right now, I think by 2025, it's estimated that there will be over 1 billion women worldwide in menopause. So in this altered health state. That's more than 12% of the population. And so if you think about the economic costs from not just health-related issues, but also, a productivity decline, that's approaching $1 trillion a year is what's being estimated. So from a practical perspective, if you don't, if you're not concerned about your own longevity or the women in your lives' overall well-being, from an economic point of view, I think it's really important. But in terms of, thinking about how we can attack this problem, truly, we're right at the beginning of trying to understand why ovaries age prematurely. And I think there's some really promising things on the horizon, but we absolutely need to do more work in this area.
Jennifer, you could tell us a bit more about the consortium, right? You created this global network of scientists and researchers and entrepreneurs working on female aging.
Yeah, the consortium is meant to be to build the ecosystem, essentially. So this field didn't really exist a few years ago. There were plenty of people working on reproductive biology, assisted reproductive technologies, plenty of scientists working on aging research, but very few in the middle. And truly, if we're going to make any progress in this area, we needed to essentially build the ecosystem. And the goal of the consortium is really to bring together novel operating ideas. We want to put creative scientists in the same room as entrepreneurs so that they can work together to take discoveries in the lab much faster to the hands of women. And so part of what we're doing is trying to innovate around getting people who normally don't work together or talk to each other to interact. So that means scientists talking to physicians, talking to people in tech, talking to investors, and essentially bringing together all of the people who have an interest in this space. So in terms of companies around longevity and aging research, I think I'm not going to repeat what David and Eric said because they're exactly right. But there's just, I would say you can break it down into low-hanging fruit. So things like diagnostics, biomarkers, things that will tell a woman where she is along her reproductive span trajectory or where a person is along their biological aging trajectory. Those are really important. Things like supplements and what we would consider treating the symptoms of aging. Those are also, I would say, easier things to tackle. But from my perspective, I think the really innovative and transformative companies are going to come from people who are trying to tackle the root causes, the mechanisms behind aging. And once we get those, then I think that's going to be, that's the moonshot.